All right, thank you. At this point, I'm going to introduce my colleague who is going to moderate the next session. He is the Country Director of Grid Works Development Partners. His name is Eric Olaya. Please put your hands together for my colleague Eric. Real good. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this session. We're getting into a session that is a very exciting and interesting session. I think in Uganda, the energy section is the one that is most interesting for investment. To kick us off in this session, I'd like to welcome the Honourable Minister, Madame Ruth Nankabirwa, to come and give us a keynote address as she sets the scene for what we're going ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to observe protocol and ride on the protocol that has been mentioned before by the previous speakers. Yeah, it is an honor and pleasure to be here today to participate in the 14th Annual UK Africa Investment Forum, which is dedicated to fostering investment and trade between UK and East Africa. And on behalf of my government and myself, I'd like to appreciate the organizers who have continued to organize such fora, which brings us together, touch base with what is happening in our own countries and find opportunities of investing. I am grateful that this time around I've been able to make it, and this is my second time. First time, I think I was with the First Lady of Uganda when she was a Minister of Agriculture, but now I'm standing here as the Minister in charge of 3 critical sectors, that is energy, oil and gas, and then minerals. I note that this forum is intended to mobilize East Africa and Uganda in particular to identify sustainable energy solutions and investment opportunities, and also underscore Uganda's commitment to renewable energy initiatives and its role in advancing regional energy security and innovation. This therefore provides yet another opportunity to identify new avenues for economic collaboration for mutual benefit, and also come up with priorities for investment to support the development of East African countries over the medium term. In Uganda, investment in energy and mineral subsectors remains top on government priorities, as mentioned by my Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance. Those who were here in the morning, you heard him mention the 8 TMs, that is agriculture, tourism, mineral development, and science and technology. So energy and mineral development remains on the agenda because it is the foundation of everything. Tourists would like to come in the country and find hotels supplied with renewable energy. Investors would like to come in Uganda and invest assured of affordable energy. So I'm blessed to stand here and add on the voices of those that have identified critical areas for you investors to come and invest in Uganda. I will talk about the sustainable energy development programs. And the government policy objective on energy is to ensure adequate and reliable supply of energy to support social and economic growth. The strategic focus is to meet energy needs of Uganda's population for social and economic development, but also for the protection of the environment, because some sources of energy are injurious to our environment. Uganda is abreast to that, and we have come up with legislations that support, for example, the upstream development in the oil sector to make sure that we tap the gas that could end up injuring our environment. The sustainable development requires affordable energy to make production affordable in the country. You will all appreciate that investment cannot come in the country if there is no supporting infrastructure that lower the cost of doing business. And infrastructure development like electricity generation, transmission, and distribution can only be enhanced when we as government save money to invest and also attract the private sector to invest. Already, the government of Uganda is making good progress in improving electricity generation, transmission, and supply to support industrialization, as well as ensuring universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. And in line with government policy of value addition, Government of Uganda has put in place all the necessary legal and regulatory frameworks to provide a conducive environment to private sector participation. We therefore encourage potential investors, private sector developers, and our financial partners to give support to develop energy projects as private or under a private-public partnership arrangement. On the power generation, government targets to expand our generation capacity to 52,478 megawatts by 2040, coming from the 2,000 megawatts that we have. And we have aligned projects from hydro, geothermal, nuclear, solar, and wind. And we have high hopes that by 2040, we shall have our capacity as 52,478 megawatts. The key opportunities that arise from this strategy include, and not limited to, participation in public-private partnership for developing those large and small hydro plants to meet the growing demand of power. Like the minister in charge of East Africa mentioned earlier on, there are projects that we develop with our neighbors. We have projects that we developed with Tanzania on the southern part, and Kenya, and we are also working on other infrastructure, like transmission lines to take us into the DRC, and then transmission line to be able to trade with South Sudan. Coming from Oluyo substation, there's a big substation that receives power from a big generation plant, Karuma hydropower plant, which we are commissioning this month on the 17th to generate 600 megawatts with its 6 units. So we are trying to interconnect the region so that we can be able to trade. And we are operating under the Eastern African Power Pool which is comprised of 13 countries, the 7 from East Africa, plus Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, and Sudan. Together we are 13. So we have aligned projects where we will be able to share trade in power. Already, Uganda is trading with Rwanda. We are selling 40 megawatts, but the target is 60 megawatts. We are selling 60 megawatts to Kenya. We are selling a few megawatts to South Sudan. And we are opening up with DRC, where we shall be pulling power. Into DRC, we are also working on a road. And once electricity is in place, a road is in place, insecurity will reduce. You know, when we talk about DRC, remember that we've been grappling with insecurity on that side. But with opening of the road and the electricity, I have high hopes that security challenges will be handled as well. The other key opportunity is a contribution to equity in financing of power projects and participation in the engineering, procurement, and construction of the planned projects, supply of equipment as we upgrade and expand our national transmission network, participation in the development of promotion of the different renewable energy technologies such as small hydro power plants, geothermal, solar water heaters, solar dryers, solar cookers, etc. And I would like to thank the government of UK, where we have cooperated very well in these areas. Talking about expansion of transmission lines, I am happy to announce that the entire country is now connected to the national grid. Although we still have to do work for last mile connection. Western Nile was connected to the national grid on the 3rd of August. And that means Western Nile being bordering with South Sudan and DRC is an area which you can target for development because the market access is almost guaranteed with DRC and South Sudan. The region is now on the national grid. Regarding access to modern energy services, the energy services in Uganda is at 60%, where we have 22% on the national grid and 38% off-grid. Uganda is comprised of 83 islands habitable. Taking power on the national grid to the islands is not easy. But we've been working with private investors to create off-grid, mini-grids, to supply the fisher communities, because fish works well with cold storage and also facilities to dry it. So this is an area where you can target to create mini-grids in the so many islands that we have in Uganda, and they are all habitable. I've explained that we have 22% of the community's access to power on the national grid. And I would like to pause and thank the World Bank, where we have a facility which we are implementing, $638 million, which is going to help us on the energy access scale-up program, which we have started to handle last mile connection. Because we need power at the lowest level possible to facilitate agriculture value addition. And we have introduced the parish development model, where government is injecting money, little money, into homesteads to increase their income. So we need to see power in the homes. But power has to be productively used. We encourage productive use of electricity by encouraging cottage industries, value addition, parking facilities. 5 minutes left, I'm about to finish. And well, as far as power is concerned, you are assured that even the tariff keeps on going down. We are targeting 5 US cents per kilowatt hour for industries. The large-scale industries are already enjoying this, while others are being onboarded. So we would like to make power affordable to you. Talking about oil and gas, we have 2 areas which we are developing. Tilenga, which is developed by Total Energies to produce 190,000 barrels every day of crude oil. And Kingfisher, which is developed by CNOOC, it will generate 40,000 barrels of crude oil every day. So in upstream, there are areas where you can come in, especially if you want to begin on new areas, licensing areas, because we are targeting 2 basins, Kyoga Basin and Moroto-Kadam. For Moroto-Kadam, you can even see oil seepage on the surface. These are very, very promising areas where you can come in on speculative geophysical surveys. And you can do joint ventures with licensees and local companies. You can do environmental services. All these will need Asia's environmental and social impact assessment. This can be your entry point. Waste management and treatment can be your entry point. Power generation by independent power producers. The law was amended, and monopoly was removed. You can come in and generate and even transmit as a private person. And then we also opened up for net metering, where you can use your rooftop, generate power, utilize some, pull some on the national grid. And all these are areas. That is upstream, but for oil and gas, in the midstream, we have critical infrastructure. This is where we expect the refinery. We now have a contractor where we are now clearing the crude oil supply agreement and also the project implementation agreement, almost concluded. This is an investor from UAE. So there are entry points for you to come in. This refinery will have residues, I may call them residues, for you to use. You can target fertilizer, manufacturing fertilizers from the ammonium nitrate that will come out of the refineries. Our oil will come with associated gas, about 200,000 metric tons of gas. You can make an entry point into utilization of this gas, and so many others. While at the downstream, there are provisions of fuel waste management services to marketing companies. The development and management of bulk fuel transportation, storage facilities, all those are areas. Let me touch on minerals. On minerals, we've been talking about the numerous minerals that we have: gold, copper, cobalt, lithium, rubium, nickel, tantalite, tin, wolfram, all that, phosphates, and the best on the continent. Some minerals are the best globally. Our nickel, our iron ore, the best globally. So on the mineral sector, we are trying to make sure that the mineral sector facilitates the electricity sector. The lithium is preserved for lithium batteries. That will facilitate the e-mobility that we have started. Mr. Ntege asked a question in the previous session about sustainability. I didn't want to interject then because I knew I was going to present. First of all, there is a law that bans exportation of unprocessed minerals from Uganda. You can't sell our minerals as raw outside. So that will help us work out a network where we shall see minerals facilitating industries. If you are interested in manufacturing batteries and you have a license to mine lithium, you will not take out the lithium. You have to make sure that you collaborate with a factory which will produce the batteries. So the electric vehicles that we are developing, that we have developed, will need these batteries. The electric vehicles will need chargers, charging stations. We have some charging stations which are helping the borders, the motorcycles, because we have electric motorcycles. Those are in place. So one will ask himself or herself, is it easy really to get a license in Uganda, a mining license? What I can assure you is that, first of all, we have reduced the contact, physical contact, like Colonel Nakalema was talking about. You apply online. You pay for the license online. You don't have to come to me as a minister. I'll just have to sign the last paper called the license or permit. So you come and do the prospecting license first, which takes you around the country. And then when you identify a prospecting area, you apply for an exploration license. It takes just less than 6 months for as long as you have all the requirements. And it is the minister. It used to be the commissioner. You had to bench the commissioner, beg the commissioner. Now the new law puts all powers into this minister, who is politically appointed. So you either deliver or you resign. So this quickens the application process, licensing process. And after that, government works with you in making sure that you settle the land owners. The minerals underneath belong to government, but the surface rights. So I am supposed to help you in convincing people to accept that where you are seated, you are sitting on gold, which does not belong to you. So let the investor pay you, and then you're resettled. And after that, then I give you the license, because we had issues where investors were not paying for the land. And so we've catered for that. Lastly, on the artisanal miners, the law gives me permission to allocate, ring fence areas for artisanal miners, not to chase them away from the business. And the entry point here is for whoever who would wish to work with the artisanal miners. You know their challenges. They don't have modern value addition facilities, you know, the washing centers and all that. And most of them are still using cyanide, mercury, which is dangerous to their lives. So this is an entry point, if you can think about it, to come and see how you can work with the artisanal miners. We have ring-fenced areas for them. We are giving them licenses. I could go on and talk about the opportunities in my area. Electricity, generation, transmission, distribution, very wide. Oil and gas, very wide. And then minerals, also very wide. You are most welcome to come and partner with us.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for such an elaborate presentation on the energy and minerals sector. We have a short time, so we shall be brief in terms of what we're going to do next. But I just want to raise some questions with the members of this panel. And I want to start with Mr. Ntefe. I think I'll... So, Mr. Ntefe, as an investor and one that's looking at different countries in the continent, what do you see in terms of your interest for investment, but the key things you'd love to see in Uganda that would enable you to invest in Uganda's energy sector or mineral sector? Thank you.
Okay. I work for a company called EACOP Energy, and our claim to fame in East Africa is that we were one of those who've drilled for oil in Kenya. I personally drove that move and convinced my board after Tullow discovered oil in Turkana in Kenya. We bid for and won Block 11A in Turkana in 2012. And by 2016, we had done our studies and we drilled the Tarakwon well in northwest Kenya, in Turkana. That came in at about north of $33 million. We discovered a working hydrocarbon system, but we didn't make commercial discoveries, and studies on that are continuing. So we are certified investors, if you will, foreign investors in East Africa. To your question, what would we like to see from the minister, from Uganda? Well, we would like to see progress along the path that she's mentioned. It's very enlightening, it's very encouraging, you know, all the work that is being done from Uganda and the rest of East Africa. I'll say this, the approval process in Kenya 10, 15 years ago when we went there was smoother than in many parts of Africa we'd been. And that was very impressive for us. It was very impressive. But I'll say to Madam Minister, we still need to do more. The private investor wants more from East Africa. I say that because as an African, don't worry about the passports I carry. As an African born in Africa, but now living in the West, I think that we need, you know, a tsunami of foreign investment, global investment into Africa. So I noted in particular where you mentioned it takes 6 months. Please, please, Madam Minister, we need it to take 30 days maximum. We need it to take 30 days. 6 months is still too much. It's quick, but it's still too much. I think that's one of the things that we need to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ntefe. I know that the minister will be interested in having a discussion with you in terms of the opportunities that are in Uganda. We'll come back to you, but I'd like now to invite Mr. Keith Stokes-Smith. And your organization, you connect businesses and you emphasize on relationships between businesses. In terms of what you're doing, what would you like to see from the Ugandan government or the Ugandan businesses that would be important to enable you link them with businesses in the UK and other parts of Europe that can help to foster foreign direct investment into the markets? Thank you.
Not sure how to get this working. Either of them. Thank you. First of all, can I mention that I'm very aware that Africa as a whole is not in the top 20 continents, in this case, for UK investment, which obviously is desperately sad. But I was very pleased to hear earlier that Rwanda, it's the second largest investor in Uganda. So that slightly changes the situation there. I'm not quite sure why UK investors do not wish to invest in Africa or even East Africa. I suspect there's some reluctance to invest in oil and gas because it's very volatile in its pricing, and of course we're moving towards a carbon-free world, and therefore green energy, yes, solar energy could be attractive, and hydro energy could be attractive, and therefore that would be something I would like to see the UK investing more in, and I'm sure that would be something they'd like to do. My brief was actually some other thoughts as to what the UK government or we could do to encourage investment, and actually identified 8 areas here. Firstly, why not create a joint Africa-UK Trade Commission to streamline trade policies, address market access issues, and foster a more collaborative environment between the UK and East Africa. Also, more support from the UK for the Continental Free Trade Agreement, support projects that enhance connectivity and reduce logistical bottlenecks, and I think that's also an issue for UK investors, the logistics and infrastructure aspects of moving goods around. I think, if anything, we're more into providing services to East Africa than we are to goods. And certainly, as I said earlier, the UK, on balance, benefits from trade anyway more than East Africa does. I think, yes, promoting green energy, which I mentioned earlier, and sustainable development, encourage more businesses to invest in East Africa. But then again, I go back to the point I made originally. Clearly, they do not want to, possibly because the sort of things we encourage them to invest in are an oil and gas. Certainly, yes, minerals, etc., is a good thing. But I think for too long, we've had it easy here. The obvious markets are Europe and other countries, and obviously, from my point of view, Commonwealth countries, where there is a bit more support for the 4 Commonwealth countries in East Africa. But I think, yeah, I think we're just too lazy. I think we go for the low-hanging fruits, and therefore happy to invest with a reasonable return on things without risk. I think we're too risk-averse. And I think we've got to change our culture, because I know Africa has massive opportunities, and I think it's a change of culture.
Thank you very much. I think some members of the audience will want to pick up on that shortly. But if I could go quickly to Dr. Rashid, you have been involved in a major cogeneration investment. Uganda is right now grappling with the issue of cogeneration or waste to energy and such large kinds of investment. In terms of the lessons learned, what should Uganda pick up in terms of the lessons that you've learned in developing this? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Eric. So just to say, we've had lots of visits from politicians and leaders from Uganda and Kenya to our facility, which is the Centre for Engineering and Manufacturing Excellence. I often tell people it's in the Far East, and they look at me and said, how long does it take you to get to work? I said, no, the Far East of London. It still takes me a long time to get to work there. But we are in an area of high deprivation, but we are part of what we call the Thames Estuary in London, and we focus on a number of things to help make or regenerate communities. First of all, we are actually helped by non-governmental and governmental organisations, and Local London and Grow London, and a colleague of mine from there, Prue Ashby, is here. So we're supported by inter-agencies that work together. That's a very important lesson, to not knock each other over, but support each other's objectives. That's the first one. The second one is we focus on skills development with young children for the future, because investing in any type of industry or sector without having a population that can take on jobs is almost hiding to nothing. So on our economic regeneration program, we not only support new and emerging businesses, but we work with local communities and school children who are as young as 9 to encourage them into the education system. As it happens, the area that I work in Barking and Dagenham and in Havering, we have a significant East African community, and we are specifically focused on establishing green technology incubators for those communities that have been overlooked before. So the key lessons are work interagency, long-term plan, focus on skills development. And since this section's about energy, I should tell you that at 𝐿𝐴 we are entirely focused on hydrogen as a new form of energy. There are 7 key areas in the UK that are developing centres of excellence around energy, hydrogen, and we're one of those areas. It is a format that is focused on net zero, lower carbon emissions, so that should be part of the mixed economy of energy provision. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll quickly then go to Dr. Paramita. And you have supported African countries to do PPPs or done PPPs in different regions of the world. And PPPs are considered one of the important ways of bringing in investment, and especially in the energy sector that the Honourable Minister heads. What lessons would you like to share with us? And also, how do you look at that in terms of raising investment for renewable energy products? Thank you.
Thank you. And so first, congratulations to the Minister for those excellent remarks, very encouraging. Just a minute on the context is that, the World Bank Group's mandate or mission is to reduce poverty, and the only sustained pathway out of poverty is jobs. And to be able to create jobs, especially in the real sector, critical is the quality of infrastructure amongst many other factors in a country. And so this session is particularly important, and I think earlier this year, the World Bank and the African Development Bank came together for a compact that, Africa still has 50% of its population without access to energy. And I think connecting at least 300 million to the grid, to quality, reliable energy is a priority. So again, this session is really important. And then all the energy of the future is going to be from cleaner sources of energy. So it's more on renewable energy. And I think we've been seeing a significant upward trend of renewable energy projects, especially in Eastern Africa and across all sources. So solar, wind, geothermal, bioenergy, various sources. But the amount of bankable projects is still very low. And whether it's pure private investments or PPPs in renewable energy in particular, these are not easy. These are long gestation projects. And I think, as was mentioned by one of the investors, given the time that it takes to design, develop, and get these operational, there are 4 lessons that we've seen cutting across emerging markets, not only in East Africa, but across emerging markets, that we think is important for us to share. One is, I think, very strong political commitment and the leadership at the top truly wanting genuine private sector participation, because most countries are currently fiscally constrained and there's limited public resources available for infrastructure development. So inviting responsible private sector to participate in infrastructure service provision is very important, but it's a big mindset shift to move from a status quo of public sector delivery of infrastructure to inviting the private sector. So I think what we heard from the Minister, strong political leadership and commitment from the top, is absolutely fundamental, and it needs to be sustained over a period of time. The second thing that we've seen is basically transparency. Again, we spoke about it in a previous section. Institutional capabilities and transparency of processes is absolutely important. It can't be regular changes in the authorizing environment, because that again puts investors in a place of discomfort. The third one is technical capabilities, not only because the private sector is going to come in with a pretty good, strong legal, financial, technical team, and it's important that the government also is equally technically capable of dealing and contesting and dialoguing with the private sector, so building these capabilities. And fourth, I think irrespective of which sector it is in infrastructure, stakeholder management, active communication with all of the stakeholders, both businesses, households, various other stakeholders in the community, of trying to explain why you're bringing in the private sector, which sectors, what kind of expected benefits do you see. That kind of stakeholder engagement from the very outset in a transparent manner is very important for success. And we've seen a few transactions in East Africa. We not only work on the legal regulatory issues, we also work on capacity building. We help in developing bankable projects. We also serve as a transaction advisor. We also invest in PPPs. There are different units in the World Bank Group that serve all of these functions. And we've been able to close some in renewable energy, especially in hydro and solar in the region. We're exploring a number of other new renewable energy projects in Africa more more broadly. And we stand committed to support this, but there's lots of issues around regulation, tariff regulations, the regulatory reform and the unbundling, willingness to invite private participation in the transmission sector in particular. The minister referred to mini grids, off grids, rooftop solars. These are all projects that we have supported in different jurisdictions, but they all require a lot of clarity in the rules of how the contract will be designed and how will it be overseen. So there are examples. The first thing we do with governments around the world is, before we get started, just share lessons of what others have done, what has worked, what has not worked, because not all models are successful, and I think we're all learning in the process. There's a lot of knowledge out there that we'll be happy to share, and again, it's an honor to be part of this session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When I come to Dr. Ramadan, in the energy sector, you have to raise lots of financing to support the oil and gas sector. There is the upstream work, there is the refinery, there is the crude oil pipeline, there is transmission of electricity, there is the generation plants that should be coming up shortly. So you have a constrained envelope. We just want to hear from you. What are your plans to address this? And how do you see yourself being able to raise the capacity of government to deliver on these projects? Thank you.
Thank you. The plan is simple. It's to raise money. And I'm here to raise money. First, we have our traditional partners we are working with. They could be not interested in certain areas, but definitely it's a value chain. They support those areas where they are comfortable. I'm talking of the World Bank. I'm talking of with its sister IFC. We are working closely together, especially in building infrastructure and also supporting the private sector that is partaking in this. But also, we are now working very aggressively on public-private partnerships. Our frameworks are ready. They have been tested. We have seen where there are challenges in delaying processing of projects by especially the private sector, and we are addressing them. But we are also coming at a time when the green financing aspect is in-house, and we've been able to work on the fiscal frameworks. In my ministry now, we have a climate financing unit, full-fledged, and we are working closely with our multilateral partners to fine-tune it and mobilize financing from that angle as well. But the big money comes from the private sector, because that's where the money is, and I'm here really to interest the audience here in the opportunities my minister has been talking about. And I think he made a point of risk aversion. There's a lot of risk aversion in the West. There are so many opportunities, and Africa now is the land of these opportunities, if you look around very closely. And there are those people who are taking advantage of these opportunities. They are mainly coming from other places. I don't see them here. From the East, from the Middle East. And they are coming, and we are doing business with them. I would really want to say, if you want to make money in the next 2 decades, get to the plane, come to Africa, we process for you these opportunities. If you wait on, these opportunities will not wait. They are going to certain categories of people. This is the message I want to be clear in the room. I see a lot of, caution and carefulness and so many questions. There are people who don't ask those questions, and they are getting these opportunities. I want to tell you the truth. And we are closing a lot of big deals in Africa, particularly now in Uganda, with some particular kinds of people. When I talk like this, I'm sure everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about. And I would want our traditional partners in development, the United Kingdom, to take full advantage of the opportunities before us. And we work together to develop these ATMs to bridge the infrastructure gap in Africa. Talk about the infrastructure gap, for example. In the past 2 decades, who has played the biggest role? Where has this money come from that has built the infrastructure in Africa? Because we have closed it, I think, in the last 2 decades, much faster than in the previous century. And we have now electricity, we have highways connecting all corners of the country, we have the railway lines which are being revamped, we have the IT, national backbones, fiber laid across the continent, and younger people connecting themselves in the gig economy and so on. This money has come from different places, and I would want to encourage the investors in this part of the world to really pick a leaf from this, and we move together.
Thank you so much. Before we come to the audience, I'd just like the Minister to have a rejoinder. I think some of what you've said has tickled her, and she'd just like to say a few words before we ask for questions. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, there was concern about the time that we take to issue a license. 6 months is too long. But I wanted the audience to appreciate the factors, the key factors that sometimes make us delay, especially if you are to invest in mineral and oil. The issue of access to land. There's no way I can give you a mining license when you have not access to the land. We have 4 land tenure systems in Uganda, whereby one tenure system places ownership of land into the hands of the people to own land in perpetuity. You get your land title, that is your land. And most people have inherited this land. One of them, land can belong to government. Where land belongs to government, access to that becomes easier. In Tanzania, land belongs to government. So when it came to the East African crude oil pipeline development, Tanzania moved very fast, while Uganda was negotiating with the people who own land. And the moment you get one challenge from one project-affected person, then the world zeroes on you. Civil society organization, you have to clear World Bank projects. You have to make sure that you have compensated people. So because of that, you take a long time to issue such licenses. But where you don't require access first, like a prospecting license, to just organize your papers, and tomorrow I issue a prospecting license. Exploration license, I have to introduce you to the local governments. Once I do that, you begin digging and carrying out samples. I give you the export license. So I wanted you to appreciate our land tenure system. That sometimes we get problems, challenges with project-affected people where somebody says, over my dead body, I'm not moving away. And you have to negotiate. This is my ancestral land. This is where my great-grandfathers were buried. I'm not moving away. And where you say you compulsorily acquire, because our constitution gives government mandate to compulsorily acquire, but you have to be prompt in paying and adequate. So what does adequate means? So that can take you to court. I wanted to make this explanation so that you come down knowing that you have to be a little bit patient with us. One president had banned this kind of tenure system, Idi Amin. Idi Amin said, oh, you know, no Milo land, no what. But that caused him problems. So when President Museveni took power, he placed land back into the hands of the communities and individuals, and people were happy. So we are managing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I think that was very clear. And I see we have experts in land here and the authorities responsible as well. I think they'll address any further questions that you have. Now, in the next 5 minutes, as we come towards the end of this session, I'd like to ask the audience to ask any questions you may have. And I think we start from Her Excellency, the High Commissioner. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody, for your comments. And my question is for Ms. Dasgupta from IFC. Just wanted to know now, in terms of the bank perspective, how long are you now looking at projecting and giving financing to private sector through the IFC for these the smaller private companies to do a PPP, especially from within the region, which includes local content as part of the guarantees? Thank you. Well, we get a lot of inquiries here in the mission, so that's why I'm asking you. Thank you.
So the tenor for the projects for the IFC, the private sector, it starts at 7-8 years and goes even longer, depending on the tenor of the project. You know, if it's PPP in power, it often goes even longer. Some of the smaller PPPs like rooftop solar, etc., it could be a little smaller, but you know, the tenor of the project is not fixed. It all depends on the sector.
The time it takes for you to agree to the financing.
Okay. Again, depends on, yes, so, you know, we are not the swiftest organization, because we also don't crowd out the private sector, the investment banks that can do it faster, because we are, at the end of the day, an organization that works with our shareholders, which is the governments around the world. And so we have made agility quite an important part of our process. So there are record deals in 90, 100 days. And there are some, like the complicated projects in infrastructure, you know, do take a lot of due diligence, right? There's a lot of environmental, social safeguards that we need to be mindful of. I think the minister very eloquently articulated some of these issues around displacement, around land rights, and there are lots of sensitive issues that need to be mindful of. In the context of infrastructure, it does take a while.
Thank you so much. Please, next question.
Interesting discussions we're having this afternoon. One of the points that was made this afternoon was take the flight and come to Uganda. My question is, there are no direct flights from I would like to take a direct flight. When is that happening?
Thank you. I think we have someone from Uganda Airlines who is here. Who said that?
I think Jennifer is here, is going to have a session, and she's going to tell you the good news, because we are about to get to a direct flight to Kampala.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Just the last two questions, and then we shall be done. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Perez Ochieng, and I've been in this convention from the beginning. So 14 years down the line, we are still here. And the comment and the question I want to ask is in relation to the progress we've made over the 14 years. And I'm very sure, Your Excellency, you've been in a lot of these sessions as well. As part of the diaspora, part of our remit as people who are still connected to our land is that we are able to introduce new ideas and new technologies to the Africa from where we have learned in Europe. I'm sitting here in this session today because part of some of the colleagues I brought to speak about today is about energy. And I thought this session is so important because everything we produce is energy related. If you look at the trends in UK now, when it comes to importing your goods, because this is a big session again in the afternoon, looking at opening up markets for Uganda goods or Kenya goods for that matter. We have been called as a company so many times to do a market access initiative for particular products or more products. The embassy is here. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, your wishes and desires are not really connected to the markets. So when we are talking about importing new goods, the trends now in Europe now are looking at sustainability. They are looking at the use of alternative green energy. And when I sit and I'm thinking, yes, we are investing more in the oil and gas, but how does this relate to the new opportunities in green energy? And how does this make your products more appealing to the UK and European community? And is this something of concern? And if it is, in here today we are sitting with experts that have previously invited you to come and see the hydrogen innovation in its start and how it is progressing, and whether some of these green skills and technologies we are talking about are sitting here right before you today and the opportunities to take at this summit, and whether these are part of what we can begin to say are ticking the boxes of which summit has been all about for the last 14 years. And for mine is just appeal and kind of bring a light to where I think there's opportunities to do something in opening up access to markets with understanding of all the trends that are happening now in Europe for green products.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the Minister is an expert in that question.
Thank you so much.
She's a minister's friend.
This is just for your information. Uganda's energy mix is comprised of green energy. 94% of our energy is green. That's why I always talk about our own just transition, because we are at a different level. We are investing in oil and gas to get money to work on the energy infrastructure. If you can give me the money I want to expand my transmission and distribution infrastructure, I may abandon developing oil and gas. And money for oil and gas is ring-fenced for infrastructure. But we also need fertilizers for production and productivity. We must feed the world. We are targeting fertilizers from oil and gas. The pharmaceuticals will need oil and gas. So for green energy, please, Uganda's energy mix is 94% green. From hydropower to solar. We are now developing geothermal. We have 24,000 megawatt capacity from nuclear, and we shall develop it for energy purposes, not for other purposes. Nuclear energy for energy purposes. So please take heart. Uganda is green. Our energy is green. Our energy is green, Madam.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. And I think this very informative session, I'd just like us to give a hand of applause to our distinguished speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you. And just before I leave the podium, I may not do it justice if I do not say that I also represent the British Chamber of Commerce Uganda, which was launched last month in Kampala. So UK businesses, or Ugandan businesses that are intending to do business with the UK, please contact me or my fellow board member Laz, who is there, and we shall direct you on how to be part of the chamber. Thank you so much.
Go down on the question, where are we? We're now at a point where when we call this session, you get all the key people, you get access. I will be honest, I've traveled to many of these conferences. I don't get a conference where I have what you see in the front row here. So we have, the conference has actually grown and achieved quite a lot.
Many of the countries in the East African community have, in the process of adapting to electrification, for their transport. A number of them have established industries. You've been told about the Kira Motors. We are, as Uganda, we are marketing the Kira Motors, and during the non-aligned summit, many of the heads of state came to visit Uganda. A number of them are placing orders to access electric cars and electric buses. And we are working along with the private sector to ensure that the electrification goes down to the populations with the motorcycles and other facilities. Now, coming to the water resources, I said in my address that much of the water resources of the East African community have not been used. If you know the amount of water that leaves the River Congo flowing just to the Atlantic, we need to use that, and even the water on the Nile. But with the transboundary resources, we have legislation which is bringing together countries to work. For instance, the Chikagati hydro project, which is making power both for Kenya, for Tanzania and Uganda. Each has 7 megawatts. And even our staff, a number of them are Ugandans, another of them are Ugandans. We have the 𝐂𝐚𝐺𝐸 water project. So we're using all the transboundary resources to ensure that they benefit the East African community. So our work is going on, it's work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, since I have the microphone, I also get an advantage here. We have at least 1.5 million motorcycle taxis we call borders. Right, so anybody who's interested in investing in that one, please talk to me. I am looking for investors. It's an amazing opportunity. The borders represent at least 6% of our GDP, and this is the same across Africa. So you see all these motorcycle taxis, those are opportunities for investment. But first one for Uganda, you come to me. East Africa. There was a final question, please.
Hello, my name is Perez Chieng, and I'm from a company called 𝐵𝐶𝐷𝐻𝐼 Global Foods. We are importers and exporters of food produce. My question to the team today, especially the Minister for East Africa, I'd like to see a demonstration of how the East African community works when it comes to accessing import markets or export markets. Because from our point of view, if I'm trading commodities from Kenya and try to bulk with a commodity from Uganda, assuming it's a single market, you do not get a single certificate, for example, phytosanitary certificate. You've got to go to Uganda, you've got to go to Kenya, and forever we are shipping goods from the same common markets into UK. So my question is, how does a single market work when it comes to trading common commodities? For example, coffee. For example, beans, which are big agricultural produce coming from East Africa. I'd like to see a demonstration of how this works from our point of view as importers of people trying to open markets for Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and all the East African countries. It's practically impossible because of the regulations and the different agencies that we need to deal with. The second question is the partnership agreements between UK and East Africa. At the moment, there's only one partnership that exists between Kenya and UK. And so from our point of view, as a business is trying to trade with East Africa, we do not see where those agreements exist. We are depending on the Kenyan agreement with UK. And half of the time, the goods that are agreed for trading are actually not agreed between Uganda and Kenya and UK, for example. And I'll give you one good example. Honey from UK, or honey from Uganda is allowed in Kenya, in UK. Honey from Kenya is not allowed in UK. These are very simple, basic commodities. We're not talking about minerals and all the other big commodity products. And these are the commodities that actually open up markets and opportunity for smallholder farmers, building impact on what we're trying to say, social impact for everyday people. And if we can't do these simple common trades for commodities, how are we going to do the big ones? Thank you.
Thank you. Very key questions. I'm going to ask our PSSD to start with the last question, and then we might come back to you just to come back with the first one. Thank you.
I thought with my boss here, the minister responsible for East Africa, shouldn't be talking about this. Because I come on the economics bit, which also I join her on the non-tariff barriers. So the Honorable Minister would be in a better position to answer this.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. During my presentation, I said we have 4 pillars of integration. We have achieved the customs union and the common market to an extent. We have not yet done the monetary union, but the very important one is the political federation. We don't yet have a country called East Africa. Therefore, the issue of sovereignty still come into play. We had originally, we had said, let's move together on everything. Now, for the economic partnership agreements, we had wanted to move together, but Kenya moved alone. We couldn't stop them because of sovereign right. So because of the issue of sovereignty, we are still doing a few things on our own. But if we can move the political federation, it will help us to organize together. As it is, I can't stop the Minister of Finance of Tanzania from organizing his market. I can't stop the South Sudan people from organizing their market. So we're waiting for that political federation. About the non-tariff barriers, yes, it is still a problem. It's something that we fight constantly. We agree, and then other people are moving in a different direction against issues about how does the Minister of Finance of Kenya raise his resources? How does the Uganda minister raise, how does Ramadan raise his money? So it's really an issue of sovereignty, and if we can solve that, we'll get to where we want to go. That is the ultimate hope. It's our desire to move together as the East African community. Thank you.